everybody, and welcome to HITRUST Secrets today. Jeff, I think you're going to kick us off with a great question about E1s.
Well, thanks, Donna. It's great to be here. Good to see you, Steve. The question that I've got is when we're talking about the smallest of the SMBs, people that might feed into larger organizations, how are they handling PHI and where do they wind up in the high trust environment?
So my perspective is that an E1 is a great place to start. And if I had a startup or a very small, almost a micro business, less than 10 employees, I'd probably be sticking with that E1 for as long as I could, just based on costs, investment, time, to complete assessments and that sort of thing. I do believe it's a bit stronger than an E1. Not everybody shares that opinion. But that's something that I think has a lot of merit as far as the specificity of the controls and the ability to then take those controls, step up to an I1. You can add other factors as required, whether it's HIPAA or state data privacy, those types of things.
Now, you mentioned SOC 2 as well. So would you rather go high trust or SOC 2?
I would rather go high trust, but I'm
Okay.
a high trust believer. And part of that is they've released a breach rate of less than 1% of those systems which align with their controls. I've also seen enough SOC 2 reports to know that the SOC 2 is very dependent on the assessor. And that is harder to justify to clients who may not know your assessor or who know that SOC 2s are only as good as the assessors. So I think that's, for me, part of the balance where I'm leaning more towards high trust, because high trust has a centralized body that reviews the assessor's work, that runs it through their own QA and says, right, this in fact meets the requirements.
So for you, SOC 2 versus high trust E1, you're going with E1.
I'd go with E1.
What about you, Steve?
As far as SOC 2 versus high trust,
E1, the E1, at the low.
yeah, specifically the E1. I was talking to Mike from Quantum Health, and we were talking about SOC 2 versus high trust. And he said one of the reasons, man, I'm totally gonna misquote this guy. Sorry, Mike, if you watch this. One of the advantages for SOC 2 that they found was they potentially threw in some of their legal requirements within the scope of their SOC 2. So it was a differentiator. It's just different, right? So high trust E1, here's all the security and privacy related things, 44 controls or whatever it happens to be. Apply those to your systems and scope, which may or may not reflect the contractual requirements of your clients. And so I was like, oh, that's actually a pretty good differentiator there. And having an external assessor attest that you are doing those contractual requirements. I just found it interesting. I'm with Don on this. I trust all the way, and they did not pay me to say that, nor did they take me to dinner.
Very good.
Correct. I'm not on high trust payroll either.
Right. And I like the idea of a gradual, like we're going to start with the E1 for specifically going back to your question and Donna's commentary, starting off with the E1, and you may or may not have a path forward to anything else because the E1 meets your requirements, right? I'm a
Yep.
big believer in ripping off the Band-Aid. And if you're going to do change, do it all at once, especially if you're in startup. Now, keep in mind, this isn't a blanket statement for every single startup. There might
Yep.
only be 3 employees, like, right? So CEO is also the CISO and the CFO, and there's 2 engineers, right, building out products. So, like, that might not be appropriate. However, at the same time, look for that opportunity when you're at a startup, when you don't have all these policies and procedures in place, and you need to create a framework for future growth, right? So like the example comes to mind is you have a startup that grows super fast, super quickly. and they get used to doing something their way all the time for X number of years, and then you try and introduce change on, let's say, at year 3, and then another change on year 5, and then another change in year 7, speaking specifically about the change in versions or the assessment types, right? So like I would be looking for an opportunity to start with R2, realizing that it will be painful, but at the end you have this structure and these domains that really set you up for future success.
Mhm.
That's mine though. I know it will be painful and people love pain avoidance. That's why I said rip off that Band-Aid.
Yeah.
I
So
might have a,
that's an interesting perspective though, because that kind of, sorry, Jeff, Steve's comment really lends itself to what the startup's goals are. Do you have an exit strategy of actually selling to a larger organization within the first,
right.
5 to 8 years? That's quite different. And it might, that might be something where, going back to the E1 and keeping the assessment streamlined and the costs quite low, that's going to be more palatable in those first few years. You also have to manage, of course, investor funds, where they want them spent, where you need to use them as far as development. But if you're going for the long haul and your goal is actually to build and expand as an independent company, then the R2 may very well be a better place to start, because Steve's right. It's if you can get those controls in, and that's just always the way they've been done. That's how they were created from the start. It certainly is easier for a growing organization to simply keep doing as you've always done.
And in general, I don't know this for, so it's my question, that the controls for the E1 are basically a subset of the R2.
They are. It's 44 controls at the moment, although have they just stepped up to 45? I heard they added one. It's a hallway conversation. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. But
yeah, so the
yes.
E1 is about 44 controls. The I1 is 182 controls, not including factors, which you can add on. So anybody who specifically wants to ensure alignment with HIPAA regulations would need to add on HIPAA factors, because those are not included as a default on any of the HITRUST frameworks. And the goal there is to make sure that organizations who want to pursue HITRUST but have no need, or it's simply not part of their business. So you'd have a lot of controls that are not applicable,
Yes.
then it doesn't make sense to really try and push that for
Right.
every organization. So that's why HITRUST has allowed it as a factor instead of as a default.
Okay. I like it.
So that's how we're bantering around the SOC 2 versus E1. It's interesting because there are the E1 costs. So E1 is so new that I think a lot of people are going, oh, okay, right. So now we can get into HITRUST and we don't have to break the bank. We don't have to sell in some sort of a $250,000 investment. And I say that not because HITRUST costs themselves are $250,000, but once you start talking to an assessor, and once you start including your internal obligations for team time, any other consultants you might need, goes up really quickly. And so, it's not far off for most organizations to know that that's an investment.
Yeah.
It's not every year. The interims are smaller, but it's significant. So you've got to be ready for that. And if you can turn around and do a SOC 2 and it's 30K and maybe you don't handle a lot of controlled data sets. I'm not saying that doesn't mean you might not want to have HITRUST as a target at some point, but if you're a startup and you don't handle controlled data sets and you don't handle much, if any, personal information, a SOC 2 by a strong assessor may very well be a this is sufficient for now. You want to make sure you've got your investors on side and they're happy with that, because the investors are getting a lot savvier these days. They don't want to, you know, put their money out there and then have some sort of a breach upend everything that, you know, they've invested in and other people have kind of thrown money in. So they want to be very careful. And I think the investors are getting much more switched on about how that investment is protected.
Yes. So, you know, Stephen mentioned earlier, you know, adding on some insurance or something, you know, like that on the SOC 2. But if we try that on an E1, how does that work? If we wanted to add in a separate control, is there a way to do that?
I believe there is on the HITRUST platform. I believe that E1s are now
And what's
allowed to
the
add on
danger?
factors, but I'm going to see if I can
Yes.
check this real quick.
Yeah. So if we add on a factor and they fail that factor, then they fail the E1, right?
They,
Or it'd be one element, right? So
it'd be one element. It would be one element. All right, I'm waiting for my code.
Yeah.
Let me just get there and see real quick. 643.
I'm in. Which
You're in?
factor?
So we want to see if, oh, this isn't going to give me what I need. What we want to see is if on an E1, there are factors available. Can you add in factors on an E1? I know you can on an I1, for sure.
Let me hit create assessment and see what happens. Test E1. So let's see here. E1 readiness, E1 validated. Choose a version. Ooh, E1 readiness. And this is getting recorded, so everybody gets to hear my enthusiasm about new screens. This is great.
yes.
All right, save and continue. Organizational background. Okay. Overview of this. This. Save and continue. Oh. Remember, HITRUST forces you to like answer things all the time.
They do, so you can't just skip to the bit you need sometimes.
Just give me what I need. All right, let's move on.
And read my mind while you're at it.
Yeah. You sure these systems and facilities implemented and fully compliant? All right. So here we have the factors. I'll share my screen.
So you see them.
I do see a handful of them, yes.
I'm going to move it to my big screen. Let's see.
This is what I see.
That's awesome. So you absolutely can add HIPAA on an E1. And then it looks like they've got NIST, they've got GovRAMP. There's not as many factors available as there are in like a full R2, but it looks like you've got a few.
All right, good. All right, that's interesting.
Yeah. That's fun. Well, fun for me.
Yeah, I think all of this is
My definition of fun might be different than other people's definition of fun.
Well, no, you and me both. So, so I'm bringing this down to the most basic level, if you guys will indulge me just for a second. So I'm thinking of the smallest of the small business, the micro businesses, right? And a micro business, you know, is often, you know, just someone sitting here. It's me. It might be you, Donna, sitting here, and I've got my you know, my email, that I need to secure, and or Office 365. That's what I need to secure. And if I were dealing with PHI, it seems to me that I would want my 365 account to be secure. So, and maybe I'm asking you a question is very obvious. Is it already out there, or does someone have to come and secure our 365 accounts for us? How do you get HITRUST certified on
So I think
365?
some of it, yeah, I think some of it is already built in. Microsoft has very strong security measures. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they're securing your individual laptop. So you have to have your own security measures as far as, what does your office space look like? Does it have a locked door? Do you make sure that you have proper authentication when you're accessing your devices? Do you download a bunch of other stuff on your device without making sure that it is, vetted and secure on its own, and it's not going to just accidentally infringe on your entire system? So those are the types of things that an organization with an IT department has, and the micro businesses that are even less than 5 people, you and me,
Right.
don't necessarily have the same needs because we are independent. I mean, I've got a few folks that I pull in on different teams, but I'm very small, and I like that. It meets my needs.
But that's you and me. But if we're handling PHI, right? Then we need to. And so I'm thinking about securing the supply chain. And maybe that's a conversation, third-party risk management. Maybe that's a conversation for another day. But
No, you're absolutely right. So remember, from like the security and compliance perspective, you have this protected space, right? That you can control. And so if something is outside of your control that you're going to utilize, that's that third-party risk management portion of it. And Microsoft has a very specific list, just to give you an example, of Azure resources that are covered by a BAA.
yeah.
Right. So the same holds true for, I believe, their Microsoft 365 tenant. You might have to upgrade a license or something like that, but there are very specific things that are described in what's covered and what's not under their BAA portion of it. And so from a HITRUST perspective, you scope what you have control over, note the things outside of your control, and hopefully you get some of that inheritance to help you along your certification journey.
All right, good. I like it.
And I would say additionally, anybody who's got, good deals on cybersecurity insurance for micro businesses, I'd be all ears. I have heard some very unfriendly quotes. And I'd like to improve, I'm always looking to expand on that a bit to make sure that I've got whatever, because HITRUST, the BAA coverage that expands through the supply chain, does not have carve-outs for independents, like, 1 or 2 person companies. You have to have the appropriate security. And for some of my clients, I just operate within, we've got portals set up where I operate strictly within their environment. And that's fine and sufficient. And, there are, because I'm small, there are workarounds, but at the same time, I would be happier with more established independent, structure that would allow me to be more flexible.
Yes. Okay.
Some of the quotes I've heard for cybersecurity insurance for my business are just a little on the crazy side.
Well, if you'd like to talk to I talk to a lot of insurance folks. So if we ever want an insurance person on here, I could probably arrange for that. So, or help.
That might be useful. I think that would be quite helpful for a lot of the folks who are tuning in to check out, perspectives, because HITRUST is one framework, but one of the reasons that they've had some traction, and I'm not saying that this is representative of all their growth, but they've definitely had some improved traction specifically with relationship to their insurers, and the insurance companies who are looking at HITRUST going, yeah, we actually want to cover more companies who are doing HITRUST because that lessens the risk that we have as insurers that
Right.
something is going to go wrong, and that there's going to be a claim. So they want to insure organizations that have HITRUST. But it would be great to get a perspective because I'm sure they have a lot of clients who also don't have HITRUST. So it'd be great to have an insurer on and have them talk about, what their opportunities are for cybersecurity insurance at, a range of business sizes and different types of data that they handle, different cybersecurity frameworks and assessments.
I love talking to these guys. I love it. So I think that you will too. So we'll talk about that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you just said it or not. I'm sorry. So HITRUST offers through a partnership a discounted insurance if you're HITRUST certified. Like that's a very specific vendor list. So we could probably pull them as well to get that HITRUST specific insurance discount
Oh,
perspective.
sure.
You know
Let me
what?
see.
That's a better idea than mine.
Well, actually, I'd be open to seeing
Well,
Jeff, if there's
yeah,
some
so
sort
it's
of
not
a
just HITRUST. Yeah,
middle point there where there's
yeah,
somebody maybe on the HITRUST insurers list and you also have a contact there. I think that might hit a
Yeah.
sweet spot.
yes.
I'm just looking for
And do we want to
insurers.
continue recording the call or let people listen to us think?
Yeah. Yeah, we could probably wrap this up.
Hey, thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. If you got value from this episode, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next HITRUST Secrets. We go live every Thursday at 2 p.m. Central and dig into real-world compliance and security topics. And each session gets uploaded right here after the live show. So whether you're catching us live or on your own time, make sure you're subscribed. We'd love to have you along on your HITRUST journey.